Hey guys, I was daydreaming for a minute. Okay, we're on. Okay, so let me start off by saying I want to finish talking about when I was in the lift car and I was having a conversation with this wonderful guy that I met. And we were talking about Jesus and we were talking about um, when Jesus will return, and he had some very, very good detailed descriptions about how he believed in what was going to happen. And I discussed to him about the writings on the wall, and that was placed in stone in Africa, in Israel, near Egypt. It was in Africa, same continent. And we talked about how, well, I mentioned to him that the gospel, that was basically the gospel when they carved it in stone, and when it was all written in the walls, it was taken and rewrote, but it was rewritten in ways that we would understand, of course, because no one can write or speak in the language that they did back in those days. Some people can and some people can't, and then some things were worded differently. Um, but I was telling him that, we can believe what we read, but it has to make sense in order for it to resonate with our heart. Um, God has given us the truth in the gospel already. Some things were rewritten, but it has the same meaning, but it's just in a different way. And some information has been taken out completely, and we don't even know, or some of us don't even know. So we talked about Jesus returning, and we talked about the 144,000 people, and I believe he mentioned 142,000 people um, would be the ones that would be entering into heaven. And we talked about what did heaven look like, or what do we think heaven would be? Was it real? And and what was hell? And but recently people have been describing hell as right now on earth, and some people was describing hell as the grave, and then some people was describing heaven as up in the sky somewhere all the way far up, and past the clouds or whatever you want to call it. But then I said, if god if God doesn't care about materialistic things, then why would he mention a street of gold if nothing's not your when your life and the fact that you're saved, that's worth more than gold? Why would they mention that when you get to heaven it would be streets of gold? Why would gold streets matter if you are in heaven? Like, that would be a materialistic thing. Oh, when you get to heaven, your streets won't look like pavement. You have gold streets. Woo! I'm more concerned about just going to heaven. I really don't. I mean, that'd be really cool to see gold streets. Wow. But then it's almost like. So I said, well, maybe they were using it as a metaphor, because that's what I mean by they took the gospel out from the wall and rewrote it in ways that we will understand, and some things were taken out completely. So that's what I wanted to know. And he was telling me about that when Jesus returns, the 144,000 people was actually going to be the ones in control of sharing the gospel, because believe it or not, certain people do not know the gospel. And I said, well, that's really amazing, because I can see a child or someone small or a teenager not really understanding the word, but a grown adult, you would think that you would suspect that or expect that they would know the gospel some way, sometime in their life. And he's like, yeah, that's a really good idea. That's a good point. And he made some wonderful points. I loved, oh my gosh, that man he knew the gospel. He was a very good man. And I really appreciate him. I really do. He was a really nice guy. Um, and he made me know, and I have to be honest, I have to say this. I am Jesus. I am Jesus Christ. I am. And Christ is in my name. So my real name. So um it it's almost like when people ask me, do I know who Jesus is? And it's almost like I believe that they are trying to get me to just say it, but it's almost like I don't know if it's time for me to say it. And then I'm like, Chris, well, they are the ones that's coming to you with this, and you kind of thinking that they're giving you hints, like, come on, Chris, you know who you are. I'm like, yeah, now I do, but years ago I didn't know. I knew how different I was, and I also knew how other everyone else would be different, but I didn't know that that Jesus would return this time. I know that he was going to return at any time, but I didn't know that I was Jesus. So that made me feel very, very, very happy, very good, and very special. And it made me feel I cried so much inside. I didn't even cry in tears. I cried every I I became teary-eyed, and it was so much because it was so many times in my life where I wanted to cry. It was almost I was numb, and I could cry, but I just couldn't cry. So just feeling that emotion has done a lot for me. Sorry, phone was ringing. So just feeling that cry was very. This floor wet. The carpet got wet a little bit. Stop calling. um, I felt very. It was it was a numb feeling that made me feel like I was receiving therapy just by thinking about it. So I was thinking about crying inside, and that was enough therapy for me. So if I ignored crying inside, it would have bothered me. So I needed to have a release of emotion somewhere so that I can feel better. But if I had someone that was really right there, like it's other things that can make me feel not want to cry, but some moments that's my therapy. So I just need to, not that I don't want anyone around me, just that I'm going to feel very good because I'm able to cry. So when I cry, it's going to make me feel good. Um, so I haven't really cried in a long. I don't like to cry. Nobody likes to cry, but if I was to cry, it wouldn't even be a full cry. It would be, again, I would be so numb that it would be teary eyed. So I would just be feeling the emotion so strong that it's not even going to allow me to cry. So like a person would sit there and weep, you know, because I feel like when I cry, it's like I'm uncontrollable. Like I don't have any control. So that's what makes me strong and numb because I grab that energy right back in the moment. But we talked about the 144 or 142,000 people that would be going to heaven that he had mentioned. And a lot of people wanted to know, like out of millions of people in this world, how in the world are some people are just going to be one of the ones that are 144,000 who are going to preach or who's going to go to heaven? And he said, well, it was supposed to be people are supposed. Well, this is the thing. People are really supposed to know the word, and you have a choice to know. You have the choice to um, know the word of God, and you have a choice to just know the gospel. Period. Especially if you're an adult. Now, you have all these information, everything around you about God. And whenever you get scared, you turn to help. So it's almost like there's no way in the world someone could not turn to help and end up hearing the gospel and it changed them. There's just no way. Now, a child, I can see. A teenager, I can see. A full grown adult, you have been through something in your life that made you scared enough to want to know what this word says in order for someone to heal you. There's got to be something. So, believe it or not, the guy, the very nice gentleman in the car said, well, believe it or not, there are some adults who don't know the gospel. And I was a witness to that because I ran across certain people who did not demonstrate it. And I said, you are just, well, in my head, I felt like they were just so, the characteristics were so, um, out of the order of God, um, and that means that um, they will be the ones who would hurt someone and not feel anything wrong with it. That's what I mean. Or hurting someone else was a normal thing to them, and that's my reason for being able to understand that some people did not know the gospel, and then even if they were showing that characteristic, some of them did know the gospel and decided to do something else. But that's what Jesus died on the cross for. He died on the cross for your sins. Because before he died on the cross, which was the Old Testament, people were getting stoned for things like that, for the sins that they did. And then when he died on the cross, that was just, a release of the old ways, and it was being thrown away, because something new was coming and everyone was going to be forgiven. Because those people that sacrificed Jesus on the cross, he could have sent angels to come down and protect, but just to protect him from dying that day on that cross. But that would have been killing the people that sat there and hung him on that cross. And and now that was the Old Testament. The Old Testament, oh, you sinned, Jesus did nothing wrong. You about to kill Jesus? Okay, well, how about this? We're about to kill you, and all of y'all are going to die because you're sinning. See, but they wouldn't have known that they had killed Jesus, the real Jesus. They wouldn't have known. Some of them wouldn't have known because he said, "God, please forgive them for what they know, not what they do." And I wasn't there. None of us was there. So some of them could have known, and some of them could have not have known. But that's a very, very deep topic to discuss and talk about. Um, I did want to mention that one of the things that he did say was that because I asked him, I said, where? So, well, he asked me. He said, "Do you know what heaven's going to be? Do you know what hell's going to be?" But really, he didn't say too much about hell. I'm just adding that one in. He stayed focused on heaven, and the heaven was going to be, well, he focused on heaven for the afterlife because he said he didn't believe in reincarnation or anything like that. Um, and honestly, I didn't believe in that either. I believed in going to heaven because that's something that I was always taught. But some people were more into studying and researching things more than I had actually been researching. But God spoke to my spirit a lot. And so now I'm learning along the way, but I've always known these things. But some things I'm still learning. But thank God I still have the gospel. I still know the gospel. But the gospel was just basically anything that's doing something right that's not going to harm anybody else or yourself, if you don't have a desire to harm nobody and you just want to be yourself and not make fun of anybody, not pick on anybody, not try to use anybody, steal from anybody, um, just things that can bother people. I'm not talking about you driving a car and someone's like your car and they don't have it and they're jealous. That's not bothering anybody. That's doing what you're doing. That's not the same thing. You know, um, or you have jewelry on and somebody's upset, and then that doesn't mean you don't know the gospel. It doesn't mean anything. It just means that you're taking care of yourself. But if you're not trying to bother anybody else, if you think that's bothering somebody, then that is not. Then that means that you know that you're exposing certain things that person might. So it's almost like you're not even, if you have on jewelry, if you have on, high flashy clothes, or you have nice cars or a nice house or something, um, that doesn't mean that you're bothering someone, and it doesn't mean you're bothering anybody. I mean, God has blessed you, and that's pretty much it. It doesn't mean that and if you think someone is looking at you like, oh, he thinks he's all that, or she thinks she's all that, that's, if you feel that like that person is thinking like that, it still doesn't mean that you don't know the gospel. So a lot of people don't know the gospel is because they don't have their parents to teach them the gospel. And believe it or not, we talked about that there are some parts of the country where they don't know the gospel. And that is mind blowing to me. Like, literally, that is mind blowing to me. And I'm definitely going to I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how people will react, because I can easily give anyone the gospel and they can know it and walk on with it and have it for the rest of their life. I can easily give them the gospel. What amazes me is that what is stopping from these certain individuals from receiving the gospel in what country? Who is stopping them from receiving the gospel? And if it's in the country, in the continent that I think it's in, that is outrageous, because that is the same continent where the gospel was mainly shared. And I'm talking about Israel. You would think that Israel would be the number one place that has the gospel, that everybody knows the gospel. Unfortunately, I'm hearing and I'm thinking that it's actually Israel. So, maybe they're not saying it correctly. Maybe they just need a person's body, an image, to demonstrate what God is. Now, someone who speaks American, someone who speaks English, we may need a translator for me, and I'm pretty sure they will send a translator. Or have the words that I say, on a projector somewhere, on a TV screen. But I just feel like, it's amazing how some people are adults and don't know the gospel. Because by that time, some people should have had dealt with family issues, work issues, just out there with friends in the street type issues, or just problems where they needed help. So there's no way someone could not have turned to the gospel. Absolutely. Wait a minute. Well, actually, actually, my father never went to church. He went to church a few times in his life, but he never really went to church. And my grandmother went to church a few times on my father's side also. My father's mother, both of them never went to church. So my father did not like my other grandmother giving us my other grandmother on my mother's side giving me the gospel because they didn't already practice going to church within their own family. So that is the issue why people don't know the gospel. And just like I said before, it's a parent thing. You can say that your child needs to be chastised all day, every day, but the one that needs the chastisement is the parent. Now, are you going to chastise yourself? Some of them turn around and say, "Okay, I'm going to chastise myself. I'm not going to harm my child anymore." They're the reason why they're acting the way that they're acting. I'm the reason why that they're acting the way that they're acting because they had that presented in front of them, So, your child may have did something totally different, but still something in the parenting issue was off balance to where whatever you wanted them not to do, they haven't developed a communication to understand the heart of the parent. They haven't. They understood, and when I say the heart of the parent, they haven't understood the soft, good spoken part of the parent. They received the harsh, don't do that again, or whatever, that type of parent that they received, and that's not God. God is light and sweet and kind and generous. So if you don't demonstrate God in front of them, then they won't. They probably, hopefully, because some people turn around and some children are saved and way different from the parents, and I can definitely vouch for that. So back to what I was saying, the new heaven that he was saying was going to be on earth would be, because he was talking about heaven in the sky after he dies, after, and then he was talking about heaven on earth, and he said that was going to be, the new heaven was going to be on earth, was actually going to be in Israel, because people finally would know the gospel. And it's so weird because Egypt is right next door to Israel, and back in the day, Egypt had a whole bunch of power. They were so high tech advanced than they were today that you would think that everyone would be on the same page by now. That's amazing how some people don't know the gospel. And you know why? Because of the war. You focus on fighting. Who can know the gospel? You're focusing on war. That's the reason why people don't know the gospel. They're focusing on war because when I seen on the news, I've always seen war, war, war. But I mean, how can anyone think about the gospel other than trying to shoot, someone all the time? That will block you from that because now you're demonstrating something ungodly, you see. And they were fighting in war over, I think, America. I believe it was America. So I'm so glad that people are now turning to the Word of God and starting to know who Jesus Christ is. Because I can teach someone that. And I've met many teachers who can do the same thing. But I was wondering, out of all the people in this world who knows the gospel, why aren't they saved? Why don't those people know the gospel by now? What does Israel want so that they can stop going to war? It's a certain territory that they're fighting over. And why, it's almost like, why can't someone just say, do not bother this area? They need to sit each other down and just think about, it's like the only people who wants to go and dig deep into something or trying to open something up that they want to keep sacred and never opened. It's always that type of person that's in the middle of going to war. And I understand that one of our ancestors were one of our ancestors had married someone on two sides of both sides of the land that they're fighting over. So they feel like one family, one generation should have the title to, should have the opportunity to go and own this property, and then the other family say that they feel like they should do it, but this family was living on this land first, but this person said, well, this person got married years ago, so we should be entitled to it. And so that's a part of the war. And so it's just a lot going on there. And it's like if everyone knew the gospel, then they would have settled something to know what was the right thing to do. You know, um, because there's no way that many years has gone by and no one has settled something by now. I mean, obviously something is settled because it's whatever's sacred over there, it's still there and it hasn't been touched. But people are still dying and fighting over it. So it's almost like that's the only thing that's keeping it still there. People are dying. And someone needs to go out there and save those people. And since I'm Jesus, and this time when they say when Jesus come back, he can live, I can actually give them the gospel and everything will be better. Everything will be better. And then that will be the new heaven on earth. So thank you so much for watching. I see you guys later and have a wonderful evening. Take care.